I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. We have Don with us today. Don, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Tom, you and Don have chatted, so I'm going to have you kick things off.
Great. Don, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. Good. You and I talked a little bit. You've got some interesting audio, and tell us how you got the audio, what's going on, and any activity outside of the audio. And we'll just start from the beginning.
Sure. So I've got a cabin up in BC, and it's in a fairly rural area. And I had stepped out of the cabin to get something from my car. And just before I got to the car, I heard this very strange noise. Initially, I thought there's a trail fairly close to our cabin. And initially, I thought it was people sort of yelling at the cabin or on the trail, sorry. And so I grabbed what I needed to get from the car. I came back and was standing on the deck trying to figure out what the sound was, because I very quickly realized that it wasn't two people kind of yelling at each other, that it was something else and something that I had never heard before in my life. And just kind of stood there a little scared, a little confused as to what I was hearing, because I wanted to place it. I wanted it to make sense to me, and it didn't. So what I heard were two calls, and it was something on the left calling something that was further south, like to the right. And it's really hard to explain because it's nothing, a sound that a human could make. It was this combination of a whistle, a howl, a scream, but none of those things. The closest way I can describe it is it was like a siren call. And these two things were calling each other. And it, like I said, it scared me. I didn't want to venture off of my deck, but I also didn't want to leave it either. So I ran into the cabin and grabbed my phone. And in that time, from when I got my phone to when I came back out, the initial calls, like I said, were fairly close to this trail, which would be about maybe a couple 100 feet from where my cabin is. But I could tell that it was off of the trail, like sort of in this tree line. On the other side of that tree line is a river, and on the other side of the river is the mountain. And from the time I went into the cabin, found my phone, came back out, they were still calling to one another, but they had moved up the mountain, which from where I was, it was probably had gone, I don't know, I'm not very good at measurements and stuff, but they had probably traveled at least 500 feet within a couple minutes, if that makes sense. And they were now sort of in the mountain, and that's what the recording is that I sent you. And in order for anything to get across the river and up the mountain, it's not accessible for humans. The river at that time, this was in August of 2019, and the river is, it's not very deep that time of year, and it isn't very wide, but to get across there's a huge rock face, and then it's just untouched forest, right? So the kind of rate of travel was shockingly fast when I came back outside. And the call itself, I didn't feel like it was a threat by any means. It was more like a warning. Like they were calling to each other. It was kind of like them trying to locate one another or give each other sort of a path of direction. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm just trying to describe it the best way that I can, and kind of how it made me feel and how I sort of had a very strong reaction to it. So I could tell the calls they were still kind of the same distance apart from one another, but had moved they were moving or running parallel to one another, sort of from the tree line, like I said, across the river and up the mountain. And, I was lucky enough to get that recording, and I guess you've cleaned it up a fair bit. And so, yeah, I'm not sure, what it was, but like I had said to you before in that conversation, once they had gotten up onto the mountain, it was like I could kind of feel where they were, like that sound was kind of sort of echoing, and it was very, very surreal. And I spent the last year and a half trying to Google and look on YouTube and stuff for sounds that were very similar to that. And I've yet to find anything that, I've Googled what do deer sound like, or elk or moose or whatever, and haven't been able to find anything that sounds quite like it. And I'm not sure, like from your experience, if you've heard anything like that, Tom.
Okay, so I've heard the whistle, I've heard the screams, the scream barks, and Will, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've had people that we've spoken to in the past that have talked about where you get like a combination of all these sounds. And I'm just gonna, have you heard anything? Again, you said this, let me just make sure I got it right. It's kind of a whistling, screaming back and forth to each other.
Yeah,
I just spoke to a gentleman in Canada he's in Alberta, and we cleaned up his audio as well. And it was the scream barks, but there was some hissing in there as well, loud. So they make some noises that are not, not really commonly described, especially on the internet.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Is that it is so hard to describe because it's nothing that I've ever heard before. And, it's this kind of, like I had described it as this sort of fight, flight, or freeze sort of moment, right? Where everything kind of slows down and you try and make sense of something that it just doesn't make sense to you, right? And so it's really hard to talk about it, and it's really hard to describe. And like I had mentioned, this is I only just started talking about this experience, and only to you and Will and my mom and my husband. I mean, I didn't even play them the recording until just a few weeks ago. And I'd also like to mention too that a few weeks before I had gone up to the cabin, I had some family that had stopped in there, and they went to the river and they went to the swimming hole and stuff, which, they knew where the path was to get there, but to get to the river, anybody going on that trail, they wouldn't see it. They wouldn't, they could hear it, but they wouldn't know how to access it. But anyways, when they were coming back from the swimming hole, my cousin's husband and their two boys had walked up the trail. They had gone north, and he smelled something that was so horrible. He referred to it as just this absolute stench of like rotting garbage or something. And he turned on his heels and he came back with the boys, and he was spooked, right? And that was just a few weeks before I heard what I heard. And in that area, of course, there's no garbage or anything like that it could have been. And I mean, I haven't smelt it because I won't venture up that way. I had mentioned to you before, on that trail, in the 3.5 years that we've had the cabin, we have maybe seen a dozen people. It really isn't a place that people, travel on because it's so remote and so hard to get to. So anyways, I won't go up that part of the trail. There's something just kind of, it unnerves me. And I had talked to you about how there's just so much coverage, like it's really hard to sort of see where you're going, or we have bears in that area also. So it would be really easy to kind of walk up on something that you don't want to walk up on, right? And I also wanted to mention too that that recording that I sent you, it got cut off because my husband had called, and when he called, it was because our dogs had chased after a grizzly bear at a friend's property that was about a mile down the road. And so he was calling me to let me know that there was a bear in the area and to let the neighbors know. And the neighbors, they actually rent a house on our property. So I had walked over, I got off the phone and I walked over to their place to tell them, that if their dog's inside, not to let it out, if it's outside, to let it in, kind of thing. And they have a mixed breed dog. It's actually a bear hunting dog. It's part Karelian and part pit bull or something. And this is a dog who is, he's a beautiful dog, but he's very, very protective. He'll bark at anything or anyone that comes around the property. And when I walked over to their house to tell them, their dog was sitting silent at their front door. He wasn't whimpering, he wasn't barking, he wasn't scratching, he was completely silent. So he was outside when I was hearing these things, right? And the following night, the night after I had heard this, our place was surrounded by coyotes, and that dog was barking and protecting his territory. And I've got it on recording because I was like, this is crazy. It started off with one coyote and they kind of like circled around, and I can hear their dog, like I say, barking and protecting our property, which I think is really interesting because when those calls were so close to our home, it was silent. And this is a dog who will leap over a 4-foot fence to chase after a bear or anything that comes close, right? And he was silent. And he's like an 80-pound dog.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in for a second. That's really interesting because that's exactly what I've experienced camping some time ago with my wife. And we heard the creatures, making a kind of a scream bark. Mm-hmm. And dogs in the campground. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning. Dogs in the campground, or 3 of them sort of barking, and then a mid bark, all 3 of them instantly stopped, and that was the end of that. No more. Yeah. They didn't respond. And Will, you and I have a mutual acquaintance, Lee, who's talked about the response that dogs had in his area up in Northern California with these creatures. They immediately shut up, all of them.
Yeah, I've heard that even in Yakult. Well, it's funny though, in Yakult, sometimes the creatures would scream and they would get all the dogs and coyotes barking. Other times it would be dead silent.
Right. Yeah, no, it's, I just, I was really, like I said, I was really surprised that he was outside at all, because he is usually quite vocal. So it was like he didn't want didn't want to know these things, didn't want them to know he was there.
My own dog was barking like crazy when I had my first encounter. And then I let him go and told him to go get him. He ran out to the tree line, and apparently he thought there was something else there because he didn't make a noise. He was rigid, looking at the tree line, and then turned around and run like crazy past me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's it was an experience that I don't know. It's hard to talk about because it's it's hard to explain. But I guess part of the reason why I wanted to contact you and share the audio with you is just kind of to confirm sort of what I was thinking it might be, but also after spending a year and a half trying to figure out what the sound was. I just thought that, by sharing this story or, sharing the audio with people, that there might be somebody else out there who will hear it and be like, okay, that's it. That's the same thing I heard.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Sure.
And, and I am, a bit of a cynic at heart for sure. So, I don't take it lightly, and that's why I'm just like, okay, needed some confirmation and somebody else to hear the audio who clearly has had more experiences than I have with this kind of stuff. So I appreciate you taking the time to clean it up and listen to it and sort of give me your advice and your sort of feedback on it.
Yeah, very glad. Don, quick question. Is this the one and only time you've heard this, or have you heard any other sounds or any other situations besides this smell and this sound?
Yeah, no, that's it. That's been it since that summer. We've been sort of working on our cabin on and off. So we've been staying, when we are up there, we don't stay at the cabin. We stay at a friend's house. And they've been clear cutting the backside of the mountain for about a year now. So I would kind of assume that if there was anything in that area that they'll, have moved on sort of by now. I have heard stories of people working in forestry and stuff and having interactions or seeing them and stuff, but I'm not sure how likely it is that they would stick around, with that kind of noise and destruction going on. But it is very remote, and there's a lot of food for them in that area, I guess. I mean, depending on what they eat, I wouldn't know, but I'm not sure what's your idea on that? It's kind of like ruining their habitat, right? So I would imagine.
Well, let me back up. That's exactly the question I have in mind is, how far away is this location where you said it's your friends that are cutting the trees or cutting the forest back?
No, it's somebody else. It's a huge corporation that has, it's a private company. It's private land, and that person has decided to clear cut the backside of the mountain, which they own, and they can do that. So
how far away is that from your place?
From our place, it's probably where they're actually cutting is probably a couple miles.
Yeah, that's fairly close. It'll probably disturb their patterns. Typically, they're only in an area a couple of weeks anyway, but right. Because they're always on the move. But logging, a lot of human activity will chase them out of an area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you say that, it reminds me of how I was trying to describe that call between them, that it did sound very much like a warning, right? To kind of to anybody in the area. It was sort of like, we're here, kind of like, you stay there, we're here. But it also sounded very much like a call to each other, letting each other not only know where each other were, but that there were people around, right?
I've heard that a number of times myself over the years, where you'll hear one or more, and then they'll get an answer from a certain distance, and there'll be a back and forth exchange like that.
And it seemed too that like I was trying to describe, that distance between them kind of stayed the same. So they were moving parallel to one another directly east, like from it just past the trail, there's a field and then that tree line. So they were in the tree line, and then they crossed the river and up the mountain, probably just a third of the way up the mountain before, the phone call came in and I, stopped recording. It was just the rate at which it moved too, right? And knowing the sort of animals that are around in that area, like I have no doubt a bear could, make that sort of ascent up the mountain fairly quickly. But it wasn't two bears.
It's possible since they were staying at kind of the same rate with each other, that they were pushing game into a kill zone, farther out.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, if they're anything like the bears in that area, we have grizzly and black bear, brown bear, and they move up and down the mountains and sort of through the valley, depending on the time of year. We have, unfortunately, like you do in the States, we have a lot of fires up in the interior, and so I mean they'll kind of like chase the game down or up the mountain kind of thing, right? I guess so. But yeah, it was just a very interesting thing to have heard, and I'm just glad I grabbed my phone, because it's one thing to have that experience and be able to tell the story. It's something else to be able to have something to play to somebody and be like, what is this,
Dawn, if I haven't done so already, I'm going to send you the cleaned up version of the audio that you recorded, because it's definitely there, and it's something that you should have, so that if somebody wants to listen to it, you get it's very, very pronounced, very loud. You did a great job with your description. You said at 5 seconds in, I believe it was, you had stepped on a leaf.
Yeah.
And that comes through clear. And actually that, well, it really makes, it's kind of like a little landmark in the audio recording. So yeah, that's great. One question I had is, you said it sounded like a warning. And you already kind of went into this a little bit, but was there some kind of a feeling? Is there some sort of a sense of emotion or something that's conveyed in the tone of voice that these creatures are doing? Why did you get that feeling that it was a warning?
I think because it was the pitch or the vibration of it, and it was a siren. That is the sort of clearest way that I can describe that actual call, was like a siren call. And without sounding too sort of flaky or whatever, I felt this connection with it, right? Not in like, I don't know how to explain it, but when I came back out and they had moved up the mountain, it was like this, I could feel where they were, right? Through their sound, through their call. And, it was like this sort of echo of sound. And between the two of them, like it was a non-threatening call. It was more of a warning, like I said, but it was definitely them, wanting, to people, if there was anybody kind of in that area, it's like, we're here, stay away, because they were close. Like, they were close enough to our property that, I mean, like I said, I really thought that they were right on the trail, which is only about 100 feet from our house, maybe 150 feet, something like that. So it was really close. So that siren, or that call, was kind of like, I had no doubt it was a warning for us. Anybody in the area, you stay there. We're heading this way. Like, um, and then, maybe a call to each other to, so they know where each other is, but also that, they're close to people. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it without sounding, a little dipsy.
Well, no, not at all. Now, this is interesting. You said the trail's about 100 to 150 feet away,
Mm-hmm.
and they're on this trail, right?
They would have been on the other side of that trail, but the the call was so loud, because I had said, like, where our cabin is, it kind of, there's a little bit of a cliff. It goes down into, sort of like a little ravine, and then across to the trail. On the other side of the trail, part of it opens up to a field, and then there's a tree line, and the river is on the other side. And they sounded like they were in that field, like kind of along the tree line. And that would have been, you know, probably 30 meters or something, or like 100 yards,
Mm-hmm.
from where we were. But they were moving, right? It was, they were kind of moving across and heading up the mountain. So, yeah, like I said, I'm not very good at the, kind of figuring out measurements and all that kind of stuff. But initially it was very close, like probably closer to 100 feet from our place.
No, that's very, very close. That's very
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And also this, I love it. Your neighbor's got this dog that's super aggressive. It goes after bears.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it clams up for these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a Norwegian bear hunting dog. It's what it does. It has, chased grizzlies off of our property before without, batting an eye, and has literally jumped over a 4-foot fence and taken off after a bear. And it was just sitting there, not cowering, not whimpering, like just not making a sound, and just sitting at the door. Like, he wouldn't even scratch to be let in, and he normally would. If he wants to be let in, he'll bark or whatever. And yeah, it was nothing. And I did ask my husband too that, because when this was happening, of course, he was at our friend's place down the road, and I had asked him what direction, like, because our dogs had chased after a grizzly that was on the property, and that he wasn't sure where it had come from. But when the dogs chased him, the bear headed sort of in a northwest direction. So it was heading in the opposite direction of where these calls had come from and where they were going, because they were heading east, right? So the grizzly was heading in the other direction as he was being chased by our dogs. The easiest thing for the bear to have done would, like, head down to the river, right? But he didn't. He went the opposite direction, which was kind of interesting too.
The bear may have known the creatures were in the area.
Yeah, I have no doubt, like, a bear would have been able to hear what I heard, because it was loud. That was the thing that shocked me, is how loud it was. And on the audio, we do have a highway that kind of cuts through, which is fairly close, and so you can kind of hear that in the background. But yeah, the volume of the calls, and it was just this, completely unearthly sound, so yeah, it's like I said, hard to describe, but I'm glad I've got it on audio and you can share it, and yeah, maybe somebody else has heard something similar to that, and it's not something I particularly want to hear again, but once is good.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I
well,
wouldn't
now,
mind hearing it. I just don't want to, be too close.
okay, well, that's good, because I was going to ask if it's okay if I just play it one time so that our audience can hear it.
Yeah,
It's a
of
large
course,
file.
of course.
That's the thing with the audio files, for our listeners out there. Oftentimes we don't put audio or video on our website simply because they're just enormous and they affect the performance of the website. So, but if that's okay with everybody, I will, I'll just play it real quick.
Sure.
Okay, so bear with me here. I'm just going to get the volume set, and I think it's right at 8 seconds.
Yeah.
So here we go, folks. Okay, so that was it. I'm going to do it one more time. And I'm going to turn the volume down just slightly. And we'll see if... I don't want to overdrive the audio system. And here's what's interesting. And I didn't pick this up until I enhanced the audio. And then when you and I spoke later, you confirmed this. There's a before and after. Before the leaf crunch, just barely in the background, and the signal to noise ratio. So the noise and signals are almost at the same levels, but you can barely make out the howls before the leaf crunch. And then after the leaf crunch, you really hear one of those howls.
Yeah. The one near the end is definitely a lot clearer, but the one at the beginning, and I wonder too, like I don't remember at this point, but I wonder if it's the two separate calls, like one is calling the other one at the beginning, and then the one at the end is responding. It's unfortunate that I didn't get more audio, or that it wasn't, cleaner at the beginning, because it would be interesting to see if, even if the pitch is the same, or to hear that one at the beginning. It is audible, but just barely.
Here's my thoughts on that, about getting anything at all. I spoke with a friend of ours, Will, I'm talking about, up in Alberta. And
Chris.
Chris. Yeah, exactly. So we spoke today. He was getting hisses and scream barks and all sorts of sounds for at least 5 minutes, very close to him, before it finally, it dawned on him to get the camera out, the iPhone out, and start recording. So really, and you and I've talked about this. I've heard screams, and you've encountered, you've had that bear in front of you. When you said we're going to record it, and you're just caught up in the moment. And so anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying I'm complimenting you on getting the recording.
Oh, yeah. Really? And sometimes, I've talked about hearing that probably the loudest. Well, it was loudest because it was closest up on the Olympic Peninsula. And I had my recorder in my shirt pocket ready to go, waiting for the second time for it to do it, and it didn't do it again.
Right. Yeah. And it had gone on for a while, a few minutes, I would think, and like I said before, when I was getting something out of the car, and then by the time I got my phone and came back out, and then when my husband had called me, it was still, sort of going on, but I had taken the call, or it had cut off. I was video recording it, so when I got the call, it cut it off. So yeah, I'm grateful that I got anything at all, but yeah, I don't know.
Oh, we are too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's excellent.
Right. Well, did you have any other questions or anything, or?
I think we're good for now. My next question is when are you going up there next?
Well, there's probably not until the spring. Yeah, we'll go up there in the spring. It's pretty cold and snowy up there right now, and of course, like everywhere else, we're supposed to kind of shelter in place these days. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to go exploring and stuff like that, but I had talked to you about this before, kind of knowing what to look for and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I would be interested in just seeing if there was any sort of signs around there. I mean, I'm not going to go deep into the forest, sort of on and off the trail with a few friends and stuff. But yeah,
and the dogs.
Yes,
you want those
and the dogs.
Bear hunting dogs, right?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's it was quite a moment. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, listen, Dawn, thank you so much. And I'm going to send you the cleaned up version of this. And we hope to have you back on again.
Yeah, sure. Great. Well, thanks so much for all your time and taking a listen, and just kind of confirming what I thought they might be. So
absolutely. Thank you, Dawn. We appreciate it.
Okay. Take care. Well, take care, Tom. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out